have to cry no more. And we won't have to cry no more.
Hey guys, first Dominance Eat Sleep Train podcast. Dave Hart, head coach of the Dominance MMA Abbotsford headquarters. I'm here with Muzz, who's the head coach of our Bentley gym, and Link, who's the head coach of our Thomastown gym. We got a pretty cool episode coming up today. We sit down and speak to Jon Sharp, who's the strength and conditioning coach at our headquarters here. He's a fantastic coach. We have a really awesome conversation with him about training for Jiu Jitsu, energy systems, and a whole bunch of stuff. So stick around and check that out. But before we do, just wanted to take a moment to introduce ourselves and let you know a little bit about our training background, coaching, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we'll kick it off with Link, because you're on the left.
Always have the bad luck of going first. Well, yep. Lincoln, head coach of Dominance Thomastown, as Dave alluded to. Black belt in Jiu Jitsu. Started my martial arts career in Muay Thai, where I achieved a black singlet as well, and then realised that Jiu Jitsu was way more fun, and moved into Jiu Jitsu. Apart from that, I'm fortunate enough to be a full-time coaching competitor with a great team of legends out there. Today also happens to be my birthday.
Hey, happy birthday. Almost.
So I'm probably going to eat my 10th burger for the week after this.
10th for 3 days.
Burgers for life. Hashtag burgers for life. Muzz?
Head coach at Dominance and Bentley. Pretty new club, new crew, but they're developing well. Done some strength and conditioning coaching for 17 odd years as well. So
just 17 years. Just a little bit.
So looking forward to hearing what Jon has to say. I know he's been doing a good job with the fighters and the Jiu-Jitsu team here.
Yeah.
All of those, the more professional ones, man, they seem to be just beasts of gas. So
yeah, they are.
Really interested to hear about what he does with that. Not much else to say.
There you go. So yeah, Dave Hart started Jiu-Jitsu 20-something years ago. We started Dominance 18 years ago, hence since 2020 on the hoodies.
It's 2020.
Sorry, 2002. God damn it.
Getting old, mate.
Just started, just opened up. First day.
Where is it again?
Podcast.
Bad timing to open the gym.
I know. Just started this year. Been on for a week, shut down. No, we started in 2002. So it's 18 years this year. And the headquarters, which we're in right now, we've gradually grown over the time. So we're in a pretty rad space now. I think about 5 years ago, we opened up Thomastown.
5 years in July,
Yep. And then about a year ago, we opened up Bentley.
Yep.
And the team's been smashing it. So we're obviously Jiu-Jitsu guys, but all the gyms have a heavy focus on Muay Thai. And then we've got a small crew of MMA guys. The MMA program is focused very much on guys who are more dedicated and more serious about it. Quality rather than quantity with that. But at the end of the day, everyone who's involved in the gym, Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai and MMA is super passionate about martial arts. I think that's the common denominator between everybody. And they want to make it their life, which we're all fortunate enough to do. We get to do Jiu-Jitsu for a living.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. But yeah, so today we're going to be having a chat with Jon Sharp, who's dedicated his life to strength training. And he's going to chat a little bit with us about how to get the most out of your training for Jiu-Jitsu specifically, because that's our jam and that's where we're coming from. So stick around and check it out, guys. It's pretty interesting. And if there's anything else that you'd like us to talk about or cover in the future, make sure you let us know, because we want to make sure that we hit you guys with stuff that's relevant. Cool. Check it out.
Enjoy.
Hey guys, I'm here with Jon Sharp, who's the strength and conditioning coach at the Dominance MMA headquarters in Abbotsford. He's responsible for training a lot of our pro athletes, not just in Jiu-Jitsu, but MMA as well. Works with most of the top guys, so we've got him to sit down and have a chat with us about conditioning training and what he's doing for those guys. So, Jon, tell us a little bit about what your background is, education, and what you're doing in the gym.
Yep. So, long story short, started marine biology, wasn't really liking it, switched to
random
switched to biological science.
Moving on, how do we train fish?
You'd be surprised. There's a lot of similarities.
Yep.
No, it was biological systems and physiology, and then I crossed to, and then I ended up going back. I got into the personal training realm, and then started working some sports teams here in Melbourne, Tennis Victoria, some of the clubs, Storm, and then I was like, right, I want to do strength and conditioning. So I went back and did my masters, and then I got into more of the athletic realm. Like a group that I was working with at the time was mostly working with combative athletes, so either rugby or karate Australia and taekwondo athletes, and that's what kind of led me into the striking realm.
Yeah. So you train a bunch of our pro MMA boys at the moment, and the amateurs coming up as well, and a bunch of our top jiu-jitsu athletes. Is there anything... I mean, of course, there's going to be things that are different about what you've got to do with them versus the other sports, but what's the thing that stands out for you mostly about how you're training them versus how you got to train other athletes?
But jiu-jitsu versus...
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu, I suppose the big thing is the amount of time that you guys spend on your back or on the ground. Like, you just find... the big thing that I found is like when it comes to single leg balance or single leg stance, when a lot of the jits people are starting out, like their unilateral ability, so like on one leg is to be desired, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, on one leg. But if you switch their stance, not so much?
Not so much. No, that's the big thing that really stands out to me. Like the first thing when I started working with jiu-jitsu athletes was like, holy crap, their ability to stand up and do things vertical was just not there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the vast majority of time we spend either on our back horizontal or on top horizontal. And then the rest of it is kind of, you're in various positions in three-dimensional space, but it's not that much time just in a straight standing position. Even when you're passing guard, the positions are odd. They're not straight up and down so much. So what are the main problems that you've run into when you've been coaching jiu-jitsu athletes, trying to get them ready for the conditioning needs and the strength needs that they have?
From an athletic perspective, like just from competing?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the same for most athletes. Like they just don't know how to regulate their training. It's normally more is better.
Yeah.
And so they just put pedal to the metal, it serves them in, when they're competing, but it does not serve them well when they're trying to manage fatigue and actually optimize their performance.
Done in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and just smash it every day. Balls to the wall, 100%, red line every day.
Well, sorry.
Go for it.
That is a common problem for jiu-jitsu athletes, I think, because we have everyday pohara, because we have a truly technique-based sport rather than primarily a conditioning-based sport. So the time required to put in for the technique to achieve the technical outcomes is great. So how do you get them to balance that? Do you monitor their heart rate, their workload? Do they fill out some sort of load spreadsheet or something to ensure they get enough technical training in without cooking their energy systems?
So how do they get the technical training in is the question?
Without burning themselves out.
Oh, how do they monitor?
Avoid that, as you were saying, that overtraining syndrome.
Like you can do questionnaires, but our classic one is we were looking at something called heart rate variability, which was pretty popular in the industry for a while. But I think it was a lot easier just to see, like, you can just do things like manage someone's performance for that expected setting. So like say someone's going up in weight and you expect so much to be on the bar, or they're doing, intervals on the bikes and they're putting out a certain power output, you would expect that to go up or be the same, right? But you wouldn't expect it to start going down. So when people aren't managing their fatigue, the first thing that you see is diminishing in performance. But to just kind of touch on something you were saying before with the technical, like when you do an analysis of every sport, jiu-jitsu is highly technical, like 100%. But I would argue the thing that's neglected there is the fitness, because in every sport that you look at, as fatigue accumulates, technique will diminish.
100%.
Yeah, which is true of jiu-jitsu as well.
100%. So having that base fitness there and understanding your energy systems and where they come in will optimize your performance, especially when the psychological component comes in terms of competing and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, which is, and that's a whole another topic. But one of the things that I think Link's touching on is that we've got this need to spend as much time possibly doing technique, because you've got to refine those motor patterns, the actual skill side of things that you require to be able to perform the skills well. But when you're doing a lot of strength training, it can start to take away from your technique training. So there's a balance there, and it's most jiu-jitsu guys will just give up strength training altogether because they'd rather get an extra session in doing jits. But then you get people go the other way, where they start doing so much strength training that they're not able to actually train well in the skills, the technical training, the jiu-jitsu. So, you know, there's a bit of a balance there that can be hard to find.
Not really. It's kind of simple. Like when someone's first starting out, what's the biggest gap? It's a gap analysis, right? What's the biggest detriment that someone has relative to what they need to perform well? And for someone starting out, like any white belt, it's technique.
Yeah.
They don't know jack shit.
Yeah.
For anyone starting out lifting, like they don't know. Can you swear on this?
Yeah, you can swear. You can swear.
Good. There's a whole bunch more to come. No, but it's just like, what's the biggest gap in the game? And the biggest gap for anyone starting out is technique. So once you get to a certain level, like, and you're competing against other competitors of the same level, then you need to start looking at other attributes as your weakness, your gap.
Yeah. Yeah. And conditioning's obviously going to come into play when you're at a really high level, which touches on the next thing that we're talking about, which is jiu-jitsu and the energy systems that it require, whether it's anaerobic or aerobic. We've had discussions about this before, and one of the issues that I ran into in understanding this is not actually knowing what the real definition of anaerobic is. In my head, not having a background in this, I go, well, if it's not aerobic, if it's not cardio, then it's anaerobic, right? Because we're doing a lot of explosive movements. But that's not necessarily the case.
Now, like you can say energy, say the first problem is like understanding the rudimental kind of understanding of energy systems. It's like, this is aerobic and this is anaerobic. Like, the first thing we need to understand is all that is getting energy.
Yeah.
And at all times, you're using all energy systems. It's just a matter of just my dog in the background there howling. Loki, stop it. I was trying to avoid the shouting in the background, but it's going to add entertainment value. Yeah. There's a husky. Go lie down. Do something valuable. But the big thing is people don't understand that it's just a matter of getting energy, and all those energy systems are working all the time. And the longer something's going on, the more you're calling on the aerobic system. So that means the more rounds you're doing, the more aerobic becomes in nature.
I seem to remember telling you this.
Yeah, no, we were having this conversation last week. Well, mate, no, it can't be. It can't be aerobic. It's not cardio. We're not going for a run. But I didn't understand what anaerobic is. But because there's so many explosive movements in jiu-jitsu, you basically, you might have a 10-minute round, but within that, you're doing fairly kind of heavy lifting, for lack of a better phrase.
100%. And do you look at the sport, like when they actually, so there's a lot of papers on this, right? And you just go into PubMed or Google Scholar and you can look at energy systems of jiu-jitsu and other sports, and you'll find the more duration that goes on, it basically becomes very aerobic in nature.
Yeah.
So very simply, you need to have that base. And the other thing you got to understand is the aerobic system is the one that buffers off the metabolites from the anaerobic system. So for people who don't know what that means, is like in the anaerobic system, that's the explosive one, right? But there's something that is a byproduct of it, something that builds up that then starts to slow down the rate of energy production. The aerobic system takes that little byproduct, which is pyruvate, and feeds it back into the aerobic system, right? And then creates more bloody energy. Like, that's awesome. So that's why when people are just like sports specific all the time, I need to train hard because this is what my sports looks like, it's the biggest misconception of your sport ever, because it's not about what it looks like at a superficial level. It's like, what are the underpinning adaptations or attributes I need for this amazing thing to happen at this higher level?
So there's a few things that have been touched on that I don't think necessarily have provided any use for people yet, because there's nothing tangible for them to walk away from and actually use. So there's a mentality in martial arts. A lot of it's old school, but it's still it's everyday pahada, or words that I won't use.
Why does everyone always point at me when they say everyday pahada?
We're basically.
I'm sorry, I'm not everyday
given
pussy.
The impression that if you're tired and you want to rest, or tired and you want to modify your training, that you're a words that I won't say. That you're soft.
Yeah.
So for
Flaccid.
For someone who feels like they're maybe being caught up in that, or that they have the mentality that to prepare for this competition, I'm feeling shit today, but I'm going to go punch it out anyway because I theoretically know that my competitors won't do it, and I'm mentally tougher because of that. Blah, blah. So giving people methods for teaching themselves how to manage their own fatigue. I think that would be really interesting.
And understand if they're being soft or
and
not,
understand if they're actually being soft or not.
Hey, Muzz, just bring the mic back.
They're playing their own mental games.
Yeah.
And the other thing, apart from talking about energy systems, I think it would be interesting to give two scenarios. One, someone like a Kiwi guy here, Josh, who I think you've recently started working with, who's basically like full-time committed. You can almost give them anything you want versus someone like us. Middle-aged, middle-aged, got a lot of shit on.
Yeah.
Maybe kids at home,
kids
other
not
responsibilities.
sleeping much.
How?
Yeah, a lot of external load.
This is a big question.
So three separate scenarios. One, fatigue management for the bull-headed person that's just like I'm feeling tired, but I'm going to punch it out anyway. How do you teach them to understand when the mind game is too much and they need to actually listen to their body? And then two different scenarios, not necessarily now, but so people can actually understand how to structure their training. I work full-time, I got other stresses at home. How do I implement extra conditioning on top of my jiu-jitsu, and do I even need that? Or on top of my MMA, or do I even need that? Versus someone who's full-time and what you could do with them. So there's
a long question.
There's three separate scenarios.
Before you
I just
do-
think you should answer each one. So
Before you
people
answer
have
that, John,
stuff
can
to
I
do.
just
You're
take a
going to
step
add more.
back?
I'm going to forget
No,
what it is by the
and
time we go
just-
back to it.
I'll remind you.
Sorry, just 2 seconds if you don't mind if I take a step back. So you were talking about how the aerobic system allows you to move the byproducts of the anaerobic system through the system, through your own system. So would you say in layman's terms, the stronger your aerobic base, the quicker your recovery from hard efforts, from rounds, and from competition matches will be?
Long story short, yes.
Yeah. I
And
think that's
jiu-jitsu,
something
that's-
that dumbass jiu-jitsu people like us can understand. Okay, if I want to
Yeah.
be... If I want to be able to repeat those anaerobic efforts, I need to bring my aerobic system up as well.
This
correct?
is something that why I was alluding to more information being required, because being someone who's done a lot of base work before, it's not always that simple, because you also need to buffer the top end as well. So,
Which, in
and-
theory, comes through your pahada rolls.
correct, that's an option, but but interval based stuff, whatever it may be. But I've like, if you're not used to teaching yourself how to continue to operate in those fatigued end zones, then it all goes.
All right. So there's a few things there, right? And they're big questions, but just because there's a lot to it. So first thing you'd have to do is identify, are you a novice or are you someone who's trying to compete? So if you're new to it, you get away with a lot more, right? If you've got no injuries and you're fine, how much do I need to regulate my training? You don't. Just get on the mat, roll, have a lot of good time. If you're going down more the competitive route now and you're worried about performance, you have to mitigate fatigue. You have to not allow that fatigue to accumulate, so you have to worry about your load so you can peak and perform optimally on the best day. We're talking about two different things here.
Yeah.
Now, going back to it and saying what should they be doing, and should they be training this end of the system, like the high energy fatigue, smash me, kill me system, or like the long, slow running, build that base? Both, right? One, ideally, there's something called the SAID principle, which says specific adaptation to imposed demand, which means if you train a certain way, you get a certain outcome. But this system, like this building a big aerobic base, helps you at this higher end. Does that mean just doing this will make this better by itself? No. You also have to do things like power intervals, right? Lactic training, explosive intervals, plyometrics, all that thing on this realm of the alactic high burst energy system, because you need to build tolerance or adaptation in that realm as well. So I think for both of that, you first need to identify who you are, and like, are you just going for shits and giggles, or do you really want to take this to the next level? And if you're just going for shits and giggles, just enjoy it. Don't worry about it. Just worry about your fatigue so that you reduce injury, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
As opposed to coming from a sports performance standpoint, it's just like, I don't want to feel beat up all the time. I don't want to be tired all the time. So I have to start thinking about my recovery, my training volume then.
Yep.
That's a different thing.
Yep. And that's something I wanted to deliberately ask to get because it builds more of a complete picture. And it builds more of a picture for as you said, the novice versus someone who wants to get good from a competitive perspective too. So then the first question in my mammoth set of questions was teaching someone how to understand when their head is getting in the way of their training in terms of slamming themselves, and giving, if they don't have things like HRV monitoring, or they're just not good at self-management.
To make that like at the base level of doing it, you can't flog yourself every day, every session. And there's the people that will know that like, holy shit, I've been training so hard for long and like, I'm just not really getting much better, or like, I'm not feeling any fitter and I'm not really doing anything. I'm still running, I'm going to the gym, I'm doing these things, but nothing's really improving, right? So that principle that I told you before, specific adaptation to imposed demand, if you keep doing the same shit, your body will adapt. After that point in time, unless you're doing more, it will not adapt. Unless you allow for recovery, it will not grow and get bigger, get stronger.
Yeah.
So if you get into that point where you're basically plateauing, it's the same as weight loss or everything else, you have to kind of take a step back and go, right, am I just doing too much of this? Am I doing the same thing all the time? What do I need to do different? Right? And that's when you, I suppose, need to look at it and go, okay, cool. Maybe I need to do a bit of a gap analysis and go, what are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? Am I not strong enough? Am I not fast enough? Am I not conditioned enough? And focus in that area.
Can I try to summarize some of this stuff
Not
back
sure
to
if
you?
that answered it.
You guys can speak
Science talk.
size talk, yeah. And there's a lot of jiu-jitsu guys out there, myself included, that when you talk about alactic systems, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So I just want to kind of ping it back.
Go for it.
You're saying it's important to build your base, which would be cardio.
Yep.
And that's going to help recovery.
Yes. Don't think of it as cardio.
Yep.
But cardio is like one part of the 4 parts.
Okay, cool. So we've got to build a base.
Yes, build a base. Keep it
And
up.
we also need to work the other end of that, which is the more explosive power-based stuff. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
And depending on who you are as an individual, what your sport requires, obviously the training is going to vary a little bit. But if you keep doing the same thing for long enough, your body will adapt to that and you'll stop getting gains. So that program's going to need to change periodically.
Yeah.
That's true. Cool. So with the sport that we're doing, particularly because of the way that competitions are structured, it's very, very rare that for the vast majority of people who are competing at a very, very high level, most of those competition settings, you're having multiple fights in a day.
Correct.
And you might have 3 matches, you might have 10 matches, you might have 5 minutes between a match, you might have an hour. So we have to perform multiple times, so recovery becomes really important.
Potentially over 2 days as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Potentially over 2 days back.
So if understanding that that's the case, particularly for jiu-jitsu, or specifically for jiu-jitsu more so than other things, are there things that you'd be doing differently in training for jiu-jitsu guys, knowing that the competition side of things has that requirement, which is a little bit unusual?
Yeah, I don't think you have to get fancy with it in terms of like, should they be doing things that look and smell and taste like jiu-jitsu? No, I mean, they can be doing things like we did with some of the athletes here, like longer rounds and stuff like that. But if you're doing like a competition like you're talking about, and you're doing lots of competitions back to back or in close succession, that becomes very aerobic in nature.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep that high power output that we spoke about, what's going to allow you to recover quickly, come back and perform at that high level is a big aerobic base.
Yeah.
So what things can you be doing? You need to work 2 parts of that. You need to work the power side of that.
Yep.
How much power can you produce using that energy system, and how long can you sustain it?
Yep.
So think about like being in the bedroom. No one wants to be too explosive too quickly, right? No one? No, good.
No one wants
that
to
was
be.
We'll all be there.
Depends how much time you got.
I think I need to tell my partner we need more training.
More energy systems. But you also want to sustain it, right? So it's like, cool, you can produce power, that's great, but how long can you actually keep that power going for?
Yeah. So we want a balance between maximum amount of power output that we can sustain over a long period. That's going to be ideal.
Pretty much, yeah. It's production versus utilization. How much can you produce? How well can you use it? And you're talking about technique all the time. That falls under basically efficiency. So the guy, think of it like like when I've only done a few classes, but I was like all stiff and rolling, and I'm going with everyone. I'm like rigid all the whole time, and I got gassed real quick. Why? Because I was just on the whole time. There's no efficiency to my movement. So this technique and like getting comfortable within that position allows you to have efficiency to your movement, which allows you to expend less energy, which means you're going to gas slower than the other guy that's all rigid and
Also,
cooking.
from a bioenergetic perspective, the more aerobically fit you are, the more energy you produce anyway, as like from a systemic perspective. You just become it's an energy production kind of magnet sort of thing.
You're saying the fitter you get, the more efficient you are at producing energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
And the other thing, just switching back quickly to the recovery thing, morning heart rate.
Yeah.
HRV, is that what we're referring to?
like-
HRV,
No,
morning heart rate?
just taking your resting heart rate.
Yeah, so for those who don't know what HRV is, heart rate variability, and it's basically looking at variations in the heart wave signal. Like, it gets a little and there's apps that you can do it, like Elite HRV, if anyone's interested, and you just get a heart rate monitor and you can strap it up and it tells you, like, are you ready to train in the morning? It's easy to do. You don't have to know the science behind it. But simpler things, like, I suppose, like I said, is seeing your progress. The big picture is, how am I performing versus how I've been performing in the previous weeks. Like, we love data, and data's great going down the athletic realm, but for the vast majority, I think we get
When you say
caught up in
we, I
emotion.
think you mean trainers do, because most jiu-jitsu guys don't give a shit.
Yeah,
Everyone
we
likes
don't-
seeing progress, though.
We say most jiu-jitsu guys are super obsessive about jiu-jitsu, but the other stuff, we just kind of want to be told what to do.
that's a good point. Yeah.
And we probably want to be told in simple terms. Like, I don't want to have to go get a degree in exercise science
No.
to be able to understand what I need to do for a workout.
No.
Now, Muzz has got 20 years of strength coaching, so he's tied into it, and you know, it's different. He can talk the talk. But someone like me, I'm not. I want to. If I'm competing, I want to know what to do to get the most out of what time I've got. But I don't want to have to, learn the science.
Yeah, that's like, if you don't want to have something to tell you, you either need software or coaching. You need some sort of coaching, right? No matter what it comes down to. If you want to learn anything,
Well, I
what
think
do you
this
do?
leads to the next point, though, which is that we look at jiu-jitsu as something that's a skill thing that you require a coach to guide you in, but a lot of people don't think that they need that in strength and conditioning training. They'll just go to their 24/7 gym and just bang out some bicep curls and think that that's cool.
Damn right.
Yeah,
Guys.
yeah, mass
Girls
gains.
for the girls.
So I think that touches on a point that's really important, which is if you want specific results from your strength and conditioning training, then you should have a coach who's guiding you.
Be
Or either
coachable.
that or you need to learn the principles. Like, you're saying, like, some people take it on themselves and they'll go away and they'll learn about nutrition, and some people are interested in that stuff. Some people need someone else to tell them what to do. Whatever floats your boat and whatever going to serve you and work for you, go with that.
Yeah, I would suggest though that most people that are doing jiu-jitsu at the level that we're talking about don't have the time or the resources and should be getting guided.
They'll probably be the
I
majority.
think one of the easiest things to do, like, if you can find someone that you trust, is and then actually follow what they say verbatim.
Yeah,
Because, like we started with, athletes suck at listening. They always.
did we start with that?
They suck at listening. They suck at moderating.
Well, which is listening for me.
Yeah, but there's
do this and they do something different.
or they do more of it because they go, well, if 10's good, then 11's
That's
better.
hard. It's hard because they're competitive, right? So you say,
has to be
I
part
want
of
you
it.
to get to X in whatever, and they're just like, I can do 10 more.
Yeah.
I feel like there's another difficult point to manage with regards to moderation, and that's that if you're a competitive athlete, you need to be training your mind as well. And it's cool to say and run around with it on the inside of your gi like you can't teach heart, but that's rubbish because 99.9% of people aren't built or born with this enormous heart to fight to the death.
No, and
we
we're-
have to build it through training. So
That's
there
what
are
training is.
times,
It's
yeah,
building
there are
resilience.
times where we have to put ourselves in the hurt locker.
I think that's really important.
So balancing putting yourself in the hurt locker often enough to build your mental resilience with moderating your training not to burn yourself out.
Absolutely.
I think that can be a tough balancing point for a lot of jiu-jitsu people, myself included. And then I guess from a personal perspective, then you get to the point where you really enjoy the hurt locker, so you seek it out. So maybe that's either a comfort zone or a lack of discipline, I'm not sure. But I think just that balance between I need to push hard to build myself mentally so that when I go deep in the fifth round at this comp and I'm underneath mount, I don't quit, versus I need to make sure I don't destroy my entire training block by doing that too
That's
often.
the high intensity trap.
But that's a really good point, because that old mentality was no pain, no gain, right? And people were like, if I'm not walking out of a session flogged, feeling like I didn't work hard enough. And there's a time and a place for that. And like you said, it builds mental resilience. So it gets you comfortable with being uncomfortable. Perfect. But it comes at a cost. Everything has a cost associated with it. So when you train in those higher threshold intensities, whether it be with weight or drilling and sparring, whatever it is, it comes at a higher rate of fatigue, right? Especially when you tap into the nervous system, that takes you longer to recover from than the muscular system. So yeah, go there, but understand if you're not looking after those base things well, going to sleep, managing your stresses, nutrition, adequate calorie consumption, etc. Now you're not recovering from that. So you can only work at those intensities for so long until that fatigue accumulates to such a point that now you start getting niggles. Now you start feeling tired all the time. Now you start a little breakdown. that little ankle thing
And
or
the
that
quality
wrist
of
or
the
whatever
sessions.
slowly starts to deteriorate, and now you got to take a couple of weeks off, or your shoulders bump, something like that.
Yeah.
Everything comes at a cost.
It does. I think it's profoundly important to understand the impact of the psychological side of training. And that's, again, that's a whole separate conversation, because it's a huge conversation, and I think it's the area that's probably most commonly misunderstood and either not trained at all or trained really, really poorly. Because you can have all the technical skills that you need. You can even have all the conditioning that you need, but if you don't have the right headspace, if the mental side of your game is not switched on, then those other things actually don't matter that much. Yep. Mm-hmm. That being said, you can be fairly resilient mentally, but if you don't have the gas, you can't perform either. Now, you need all three elements. So if you're looking at performance, you've got your technique, you've got strategy that overlays that. So we could break it down in more areas, but let's keep it real simple. You've got your actual skills, your technique, you've got your conditioning, and then you've got your mental game, like how well you perform psychologically. And all three of those things are profoundly important. But the one that's most often neglected is training your head, which is why I think a lot of guys just have that no pain, no gain, every day harder kind of thing. Because like if I smash myself, and I keep coming back, then no one's going to be able to break me in competition. But you got to be real careful with that.
Until you break yourself before the competition.
Well, physically, and I've had training camps that I've done overseas that have been like 2 super hard sessions. Every day for 10 days, and by the end of the camp, you don't want to know about jiu-jitsu anymore. You don't like you're just like, I'm done.
It shatters you.
Yeah, you peaked after 3 days, and you're like, I'm done.
And comp time comes, and you're a different person.
Yeah.
And in fact, you don't have the pahar to come comp time.
No, you
because
don't.
You're just so fried.
Yeah.
Manage your fatigue.
Yeah, exactly. So there's got to be a balance.
Well, the balance is, going back to that first point, what's the gap analysis? Where's your biggest deficit? Are you someone that constantly talks yourself out of it, that like has that negative belief system, or are you someone that doesn't spend enough time in the conditioning and your gas tank's running low? Like, where's your gap? Where do you need to focus more of your attention to?
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu is an interesting sport because we're rolling every day. Like every time you come to training, you're doing rounds. It might be 2 rounds, it might be 5 rounds, it might be 10 rounds, but anytime you jump on the mat and train, you're doing some rounds. They push your energy systems. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get fitter. And of course, there's things you can do to supplement that. But I think
to a point, if you keep doing the same thing, like you're not maintaining. You're just maintaining. You're not progressing. There's a difference.
Exactly. So what I was going to say is, if you do the gap analysis initially from whether it be MMA or Jiu-Jitsu practitioner's perspective, when you're a white belt, you have zero conditioning for it. And a lot of that is because your effectiveness and efficiency is crap. So initially perceived gains in fitness will be, fitness, yes, but a lot of it will be efficiency and effectiveness improving. So if we look at it then from a belt level perspective, and we go,
can I just interrupt for a second?
Can we stop you?
I just want to make sure that we understand that really clearly, because again, look, I want to put this in simpler terms for muppets like me that don't understand the language that well. When you're a white belt, you don't have any skills. There's a skill deficit. And if there's a skill deficit, particularly in our sport, the only thing that you can make up for it with is just essentially athleticism, speed and power. You were saying then, though, that it's a bit of an illusion that you're getting fitter because you're actually just becoming more efficient at jiu-jitsu. You're becoming more technical.
Well, I'll give you a prime example of that. I did some skipping the other day, and it was literally the first time I'd skipped in, 3 or 4 years. And it was mid-session, so it wasn't like I'd first started, but I was watching my heart rate. And for the first minute, I wanted to stay in a certain range, and for the first minute, it just blew out massively. So I actually took a break, went back to it, dropped by about 5 beats, went back to it, dropped by about 5 beats, went back to it, and then I was skipping consistently, and I couldn't get it back up.
Yeah.
And that was simply me not holding myself in a tense fashion. I'd relaxed into it. I wasn't jumping around like a spastic. I was being efficient in terms of staying in the same space, staying on the same spot, only jumping as high as I need to, that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying that they aren't getting fitter. They will be getting fitter, but
they have to be.
a lot of your perceived, for instance, you can walk in having had a long time off, and relatively comfortably last a class with a lot of reasonably adept grapplers.
It depends on what your level is when you walked away.
This is because you already have efficiency and effectiveness.
Yeah. So again, just to make it clear, when you're talking about efficiency and effectiveness, you're talking about that in terms of the skill.
Yes.
Of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So the better you get at jiu-jitsu, and this is, I think, the irony of it, right? The better we get, the less energy it takes for us to do it.
The more efficient you become with your energy expenditure.
When you're a white belt and you suck at it, now, I think it's important as well to define timelines too. So if you're talking about, well, you know, you're going to get more efficient and effective at it, so there's not going to be that, you know, the perceived gain in fitness is not really going to be that big. But jiu-jitsu takes a really long time to get good at. So for the first 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, you still suck enough that every session is quite demanding physically. So you're going to be getting fitter and stronger for sure in that period. But I would argue that from kind of blue belt onwards, the efficiency starts to pick up, the physical demands start to drop.
This is what I'm saying. So from that level, when skill is pretty good, and conditioning, strength and conditioning becomes a bigger part of, unless you're someone freaky like Marcelo who doesn't ever do it or never did it, it becomes a bigger part of the competitive aspect. How would you introduce it? What sort of frequency would you suggest for the average person? That kind of thing. Like in terms of balancing strength sessions throughout the week with skill training, with conditioning training.
How should they balance their week?
Yeah, how would you balance it?
Depends on the individual. Like,
Just
a large question.
I know that's a tough one.
Just
How often
before
can
you
they
go
train?
into that, can I again just recap what we just spoke about in terms of efficiency at white belt, etc. We're all coaches here, and we all probably get dozens upon dozens of white belt students who come to us and go, "Oh, coach, you know, what conditioning should I do? I've got no gas. Which weight should I lift?" You know, they've been watching Galval throw sandbags around for an hour and a half. When I would take almost, I'd be willing to bet money that our common reaction is you just need to do more jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So if you're at the white belt level and you feel like you have no conditioning, it's because you need to improve your technique. So your adaptation should come from, you need to get on the mat more. You need to get better at jiu-jitsu first before we get to the phase that you're talking about, okay, where now you've got a base skill set and now the conditioning payoff is really going to be large. How do we...
Yeah, all the conditioning in the
into
world
that?
doesn't matter if you've got no skill. You're still going to get gassed.
Yeah, 100%.
If you don't have any jiu-jitsu skill.
So if you're...
Well, and you've experienced that because you're pretty fit, you're pretty strong, and then when you first started training jiu-jitsu, it was...
Got cooked.
Yeah, got cooked. Yeah, got cooked.
So I guess what I'm asking, like, if someone can't go and get advice from a strength and conditioning coach, and they were just trying to implement some stuff themselves, and they weren't going to go and read all the articles on PubMed,
who doesn't?
how
Light reading.
how would they begin to implement some strength and conditioning?
If they're a novice, it's all going to work initially.
Let's say blue belt. Okay, yeah.
So if
Oh,
you're
let me
new to
step
it,
back on it.
sorry,
I'm a white
so
belt.
I'm just going to
I'm a white belt.
Yeah.
And I'm come to you. I'm like, and you're my you're my strength coach. And you're like John, I'm training jiu-jitsu now every day, but I'm also training the gym 5 days a week. But I just I'm mad in love with jiu-jitsu, and I just want to do my strength training to get good at that. Like, how should I change how I'm training? So let's just talk about frequency, because that's a really common thing. You get guys that are hitting the gym.
I've got a better question.
4 or 5 times a week.
I've got a better question.
So frequency for starters.
Do most often what you want to get best at. So if you want to get better at jiu-jitsu and the skill of it, if you've been training 5 times a week in the gym, switch that around. Suddenly do 5 times a week on the mat, maybe once or twice a week in the gym.
Yep.
So yeah, wherever you put most of your focus is going to get most of your, especially when starting out, it's going to get most of your...
Do you have strength and or conditioning markers that, because for instance, we both know that when you get into lifting weights, if it excites you, you just want to lift more and more and more. But obviously that's pointless from a jiu-jitsu or MMA athlete's perspective.
To a point.
Yeah. So what is that point? For basic strength movements, just think, let's say, squat, deadlift, bench, and in terms of maybe a percentage of their body weight, and in terms of let's say, I don't know whether you do like a 6K run or whatever it may be, do you have a particular conditioning marker, anaerobic and aerobic, that you try and hit them, get them to, and then go, well, we could get you fitter, but the trade-off of that is that you're going to be fried for jiu-jitsu. And now you're at this level, it's maybe switched the scale back to you need to work on your technique because you're actually a beast of strength and conditioning.
So we've got markers, most certainly, for people to hit. And what we do is we get the better fighters, we get their aerobic, their anaerobic scores, their strength scores relative to body weight, and we've got a little score, basically, that people need to start hitting.
Yeah.
And obviously, the better fighters, the more accurate the data. For most people, they're not going to do anything like that. So very simply, the big thing, again, that we've touched on heaps is technique. Like if I roll against Adele, and I'm new to it, like a 52-kilo girl, and it doesn't matter how strong I am, my strength standards are way beyond hers, right? But the skill, the deficit of the gap was so large that although I'm, squatting 3 times my body weight or whatever, and this girl can't even squat her body weight yet, she's still subbing me every single round. Why? Because the gap's so big. So again, I think it goes back to that kind of little gap analysis where we're like, okay, my skill level's getting to a point now where I'm relatively competitive with most people, so I want to edge above them. How do I edge above them? I use everything at my disposal. We're kind of progressing at the same rate in terms of technique, so I'm going to get stronger in the gym. I'm going to get faster in the gym. How strong should I be? As a very, very rough rule, normally cool things start to happen as like 1.5 times body weight for a squat, or 1.6, these are for male scores, 1.2 for females, like your body weight times 1.2 for a female, 1.5 for a male as a squat. Bench has got its standards like 0.8 and 1, but just get your strength up. But once again, I would say, are you competing at the same level as someone else? Do you need to bump something else in terms of fitness, speed, whatever it might be?
Yeah.
Did that hit your question?
Yeah.
So speaking of strength and speaking of aerobic, anaerobic energy systems, how does strength play into conditioning and your energy systems?
Yeah. This goes back, right? We kind of skimmed over it at the beginning, but I think there's such a misconception of what these things are. Because when people think strength, if I say get stronger, people think power lifter, lifting heavy weights, lifting dumbbells, and it's such a misconception. The definition of strength is to produce a force against an external resistance. Now, to do that over time and to do that repeatedly is just strength endurance. So when you say strength and people think like you've got to be stronger, it's just about energy and how much energy you can produce and how long you can sustain that for. So this concept of like, okay, lift heavy weights to get stronger, run on the treadmill to get more conditioned, it's such crap because it's so generic and it misses the whole point. It's about what can I do to produce as much energy as possible so I can push as much force against an external resistance, in this case, the person I'm rolling against, for as long as possible before I gas out. Now, there are many different ways to do that, and this is when we get outside in conventional methods, when you start to manipulate how long you work for, how long do you rest for. Like you might do things that we get the guys with heart rate monitors on, and we get them to do strength training. So they might do like 85% of their 1RM, deadlift, squat, bench, push-up, deadlift, squat, push-up, whatever, like kettlebell swing, and whatever combo you want. But they might do that for 20, 30 minutes. So now they're working the strength conditioning component of that equation, not just your conventional, this is this, this is this. This is how it fits together.
And I think we've all had those roles where you first tie up with someone and you're like, whoa, old boy here is strong. And 3 minutes in, you're like, not so strong now, are you, buddy?
Yeah.
Because, he might have 1 RM max strength, but if all he ever does is 3 reps of bench press, by the time you go 3-4 minutes into the match,
100%.
He's lost his strength. But I guess another interesting point to that is, would you say it's true that, or not, the stronger you are, the less effort required to achieve the same result, so therefore you should have more endurance? For example, if it takes me to bridge and roll Dave 100% of my maximum strength and technique, okay, let's put technique aside for a sec, I get a little bit stronger through, say, my glute bridge, and now I can bridge and roll him with only 70% effort. I can then do more bridge and rolls in a round, less taxing on my energy system. Would you say that's true?
100%. That's why you get stronger. So you don't get, like, you got to think about this. If you got two athletes and they're both rolling, right, or doing whatever drills, they're lifting weights, whatever, but one's working at, say, 180 beats per minute and the one's working at 60. So let's say one's working at like 85% max heart rate, the other one's working at 70% max effort. Who's going to cook first?
Yep.
The guy's working at 85%. It's that simple.
Yep.
Right? So yeah, if you get stronger, that means when you bridge in and rolling Dave, you exerted less effort overall for your maximum effort. So what can you do? You can do that more often. What can you lift for more reps? A lighter weight or a heavier weight?
I think it's important to kind of summarize that, like with, if we separate, though they cover the same thing, if we separate conditioning and strength for a second, like max strength, and you would have come across this and be familiar with the analogy in terms of them being vessels or cups, and the higher, essentially what you're saying, like the higher your 1RM, the more potential you have for strength endurance, the more potential you have for explosiveness, etc. But it doesn't mean shit unless you actually work those. So, I mean, you'll still have it, but not to the potential you could if you actually spent some time developing it, much like John was saying before, with you growing your vessel, building your vessel, or building your base in terms of in terms of endurance or your aerobic base, it increases your potential to perform at the upper end, but you will never be able to perform at the upper end at your potential unless you actually work on that end as well.
So this would
going
be
back to that, work both things.
Yeah, so this would be where periodization would come in, correct? And how is it that you generally approach periodization with BJJ athletes?
Same as anyone. Where do they want to go? How long do I have? What is their greatest deficit? And then I plan from there. So it's very simple. If I've got 8 weeks for someone or I've got 12 weeks for someone and they very deconditioned, guess where I spend most of that initial training block? Building the capacity, building that big foundation that we spoke about before. If they piss weak, right, and relative to their standards, and they can barely lift a barbell, but they're very technically savvy, I need to get them stronger. Where do I spend most of that focus? Getting them stronger. So I think going back to what I've been reiterating the whole time is where do they need to be by a certain date and what's the biggest gap they have? And if it's just a whole bunch, then I just put them all together, but work on your biggest four. It's going to close that ceiling the quickest.
So okay.
So I was just going to say, is there a pattern? Do you generally see one area that most BJJ athletes lack in, or is it more about body types and muscle fibers and that kind of stuff?
That's a really good question. If I had to say generic across the board, no, it's kind of individualized, I'd say. And some people really don't like, for some of the fighters that we've talked about, some of them really don't like that height because they built such technical capacity. They like a slower flow game, right? They like to roll slower, more controlled. That's their pace. So when you push them in those uncomfortable high anaerobic rounds that we're talking about, they hate it. Like they fight you against it. They don't want to do it.
Now we're talking about stylistic impact on
conditioning.
You're saying that you? Just like...
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you've got guys who have got much more explosive, dynamic games, explosive like passing. And then you've got guys who've got that slow, technical. Like lapel guard's a really good example. It's a really slow, technical game. Doesn't require really high energy outputs. But then you've got a really dynamic passing style. Someone like Leandro Lowe.
yeah, very dynamic.
Super
passing.
dynamic.
Even
Super
his guard game's dynamic.
Yeah. So that was going to be one of my questions: is would the style of your play have a big impact on your training? And to me, it seems obvious that it would be yes, but what do I know?
Yes, as long as but the problem is you can't always control the pace of the fight, right?
Yeah.
So if someone makes you play their game, then what happens?
Yeah. So that takes us to the next question, which is you've got diminishing returns, right? So if you've got a certain style of play, you've probably already got fairly good conditioning in that way of moving, and you were going to get more gains earlier on from working the area that you're deficient, that you don't like being in. It's probably going to protect you more in the fights that are actually more difficult. Does that make sense? So let's say I've got let's look at my actual style of play, which is I play a lot of guard. I've got skinny little chicken legs. One of the things I struggle with that makes me gas if someone passes in a style that makes me do a lot of really like heavy like leg pressing type motions, that kind of thing can tire me out pretty quickly.
Just answered your own question.
Exactly. So, but if I'm having an easy fight, it doesn't matter.
There you go.
If I'm having a hard fight, that's more likely to come into play. So it doesn't make sense if I'm looking at where I'm going to get into trouble to work the things that I'm actually using more often, because that's happening by virtue of my style of training. The thing that's probably going to be more useful to me when it really counts, because why am I doing conditioning training? Like if I'm actually going to take the time out of my day to do conditioning training, it's probably because I want to compete and win something. And so the thing that I'm trying to cater for is the things that are the matches that are going to be difficult, not the ones that are going to be easy.
Yeah, 100%.
Sorry, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, you go.
Okay.
Go from us.
I'm not going to answer it. What I am, you answer it, and then I'll ask my question.
Right.
Thanks, Maz. Nice of you. Cheers, buddy.
I've got a more important question. You said,
Of course you do, Maz.
Your one was average. This
Humble
one will be
brag.
good.
Yeah.
Murray, humble brag.
I got to
rather
ask a
than
question with some
humble.
science lingo, mate. These guys seem stupid. Do you want us to leave? We can.
Just the two of
You
us.
could just talk by yourself into the. I mean, John doesn't even need to have
Yeah,
to be.
you
in.
kind of answered your own question. You were like, if someone's playing this game, like forcing me to play a game that I don't like, I'm going to get gassed real quick. Why?
Yeah.
Because I'm not efficient in that movement. I'm going to
Yeah.
get cooked. All the things I haven't built the capacity there. All those things we spoke about. But it's not a bad idea to get really good at what you're really good at.
Yeah.
So that you absolutely dominate. So when you are explosive, you can hold still for a while and then change positions really quickly.
Yeah.
Like, why not get better at that?
Yeah.
So you absolutely dominate someone. You play towards your strengths, but you also need to bring up your weaknesses. Is basically it.
And there's going to be, there are diminishing returns with most things, right? So your system adapts. You start to get less gains from doing the same thing. So
Correct.
I'm probably going to get more gains faster in the areas that where the gap is.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
we will probably bring up your whole game.
yeah, cool. Now that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can I ask, in terms of, let's say you don't have a strength and conditioning person that you trust to go and say, to go and ask, what am I weak in? Because you don't understand what you're weak in yourself, or you've asked your coach and they continue to just say, you need to be on the mat more, or you need to get better at technique. What tests could they do
That would be true, though.
themselves from a strength and or conditioning perspective to determine what they need to work on?
I think we didn't give it enough credit for what it's worth, is asking a coach. Like coaches, in my opinion, your guys' job is to understand enough about it that you can say to someone,
So that was the second
hey,
part. Like,
you're really crap at maybe this. Maybe you need to work your capacity. You're very slow with this. Go away and learn about, or do this, or work on this.
Yeah.
Not enough that you're like going deep down the rabbit hole,
Yeah.
but you should be able to identify those weaknesses in someone where you're like, well, this person really just needs more technical time or more.
Yeah.
This person gets gassed real quick, or they're just way too strong and then they can't sustain it.
I think one of the things that comes up with that as a coach, it's really easy to be tempted to try to drag a student away from what their natural tendencies are. Like this person keeps like blowing their gas tank because they got like they're really explosive, so I've got to try to get them to roll in a slower, more controlled way. And there's some truth to that, but
Or you can get them fitter.
Or you can get the fitter, which I think like there is a little bit of a balance. There needs to be control. It doesn't want to be just chaos.
Yeah.
But I think trying to get a cat to be a dog is never going to work. And we've got to be really careful with the students with that. Like someone that we were talking about before, Josh, who likes to go pretty hard. Trying to get him to wrestle in a really different style is going to be very, very difficult, and is probably going to be detrimental to him, definitely in the long term. If you try to take him too far away from
You
his
don't need to change it. You can still play towards your strengths.
Yeah.
100%.
one of the first things I like, Pat at Bentley, he's like that, like, incredibly strong and explosive, and but as a result, he'll sometimes gas himself pretty quick. So rather than giving them anything that's too complicated, initially I'll say to them that it's clearly an important part of their style, and that they should it's good, and that they should keep on doing it, but they need to learn to limit themselves to portions.
Yeah, it's got to be moderated.
Yeah, so they can go balls to the wall for 15, 20 seconds, whatever, and then regardless of what's happening, they need to hunker down and chill out a bit and manage the fight until they feel like they can go again, and then go Pat mode again.
And then that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is as your efficiency, your technical efficiency increases, and your understanding of the strategy, the bigger picture of the role, then all those things become better.
Correct.
And you can still have a very dynamic, explosive style, for lack of a better phrase, but it's couched in
It's
a framework.
controlled.
Yeah.
It's a controlled aggression.
Yeah.
So someone's explosive and strong, but they're not like that the whole fight. They know when to pick and choose it. And really interesting, there's actually find the really high level athletes are the ones that create stiffness and then are the most relaxed. So you would think high level athletes are actually like really stiff and strong. They're ones that can create stiffness, instantly relax, create stiffness again.
I definitely one of the things I try to stress with my students a lot is just use the amount of force that you need to complete the movement at that time. So you get a novice who's on the mount and he's squeezing the guy as hard as he can. Yeah? And you might have him completely controlled, spine twisted, whatever, but he's just squeezing, then the guy bridge and rolls him and he's got no gas left and he can't play guard. So I think that's important. But I just wanted to change tact for a little bit, because one thing we haven't spoken about, and I think it's important, particularly for the older athletes, us being masters athletes, today being my 39th birthday.
looks at me and
yeah, thanks. I'm still younger than these two boys.
Yeah.
How old are you, John?
Happy birthday.
How old are 36?
Okay, I'm not the youngest.
Chicken.
And that is so
41.
7.
41.
41. Yep, 41.
And that is strength and conditioning for injury prevention and longevity on the mat.
Rehab.
And for me, I mean, I'm not an athletic guy, I never have been. But when I look at my strength and conditioning program, the number one pillar, the number one goal is, how do I prevent myself from getting injured? Or how do I make my body strong enough to withstand the pahada?
Absolutely.
Yeah? And then number two, how do I improve my physical attributes? So I don't know if you can speak a bit on that and your approach to that.
Just remember the conversation we had when I was like, all right, I'm going to do some strength training, but
Yeah, you're a broken man. You still are.
well, yeah, but the parameters that I
Slightly
gave
less.
you, which made it really difficult, was
I don't want to do anything. I
want to be sore or tired.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure I stop getting injured.
Yep. Yeah. You'll find like when you're younger, you're real robust and you're keen and you bounce back from things and you recover very quickly. Obviously, the rates of recovery are slower as you age. Like something called sarcopenia kicks in, which means we have like muscle decay, for lack of a better word, like we're
Old.
We get slower, less strong muscles, right?
It's just slowly dying.
Slowly
that's actually
withering
what's
away.
happening.
Some things start to happen. But as you find you get older, you're more worried, or if you've been injured a lot in the past, that becomes your primary focus. I care less about the conditioning side of stuff and performing well. I just don't want to get munted on the mat every time I'm on it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be sore so that I can roll. So obviously understanding that beforehand dictates how far or where your focus is going to be again. But once again, it's just that gap analysis going, what do I want to do? What are the problem areas? So let's say you're a shoulder guy or risk stick with shoulder. Like you can do a caveat, like an oversimplification of it would be get really strong and mobile around the shoulder. Okay. But most people don't know how to do it. Unfortunately, that's one of the things where you do need a coach, because you might not have a lot of external rotation, right? So someone's trying to Kimura you or something like that, and you're like, oh yeah, I just do bench press and I'm fine. But really, like, you need to start releasing the tissue here, start to improve that range of movement, get it all strong, so all those stabilizers around the rotator cuff and all those other shoulder muscles get really strong and can control that end range. So unfortunately, this is for me something that you do need to seek out a coach. You can YouTube some things if you like, but the truth is you're using a shotgun approach where you're kind of doing a little bit of something and you're hoping for the best.
Yeah.
This is where you need to get someone who
I think it's a no-brainer if you're talking about prehab or rehab. So if you're coming back from an injury, if you're just trying to home bake that, you could be going down a bad path.
I don't even know if it's necessarily coming
warming
back from injury. I think it's a lifetime thing. You know, I think
Which is what I'm talking about with prehab.
Yeah, like it's not necessarily whether you're currently injured or have been injured in the past, but how do you build your body so that it does withstand the rigors of training?
Yeah,
which I
and
think,
in all surgeries, we see that prehab has the quickest return to play, as opposed to people that don't do strength training prior to any surgery. So getting strong, and this is the realm again of going, cool, I want to roll a lot and I want to be technically sound. Well, then you need to be doing things outside of jiu-jitsu that spare you so that you can do jiu-jitsu, right? Because we know those people bounce back from injuries quicker.
So,
I think a lot of it is mentality based in terms of being really clear about what your outcome is. Because for someone like me, for instance, when I get into particularly lifting, when I get into lifting again, I can quickly forget why I started it and just start going balls to the wall to see what I can lift.
Lifting for lifting's sake rather than
Lifting for lifting's
jiu-jitsu.
sake, not lifting because I'm an old guy who needs to not break on the mat. So it really, I don't think it would matter almost, like they could almost do anything as long as their mentality was, I'm doing this and their mentality would kind of guide them to the right activities, I think, a little bit to a certain degree.
Yeah, most people know if you know you don't want to get injured, if your motivation is big enough, you're going to do it. If you've been injured enough
they
time,
just have to be
you're going to do
clear
the
about
work.
their intention and keep it crystal clear.
This goes back to one of the things that we touched on at the start, which was most jiu-jitsu guys are mad obsessive about jiu-jitsu, and if they give man, how many times do we say at the end of class, guys, take some time to stretch, and you've got maybe 10% of the guys will actually hang back and stretch. So given the choice between doing something that's going to be that's going to be better for recovery or even create some resilience, some resistance in your body to the rigors of training, or doing some more jiu-jitsu, they're going to do, like, most guys just want to do jiu-jitsu. Yeah, especially at our age as well, when we've got a lot of things going on. If you've got family, kids, business, whatever, most of what we're doing is, how can I actually just be on the mat as much as I can? So what do I need to do? And even at our age competing, yes, conditioning is important, but our rounds are shorter and we typically have less of them. So the demands for conditioning are lesser.
That said, sometimes a shorter round means a more intense round.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But most jiu-jitsu guys, even guys who are younger and want to compete, they just want to be on the mat more. I think that's a thing that you're battling, is like, well, you really should be doing this thing so you're not going to get injured.
It's part of learning, man. It's part of, like, we've all been there, and you want to do what's fun. You don't want to do the boring shit. So why would you want to do it? It's like, if I could do TheraBand external rotation, or I could, roll with someone and do takedowns for 20 minutes, what would I prefer to do?
I actually had a bit of an epiphany during training before the whole COVID crisis, where I knew that I had neglected post-training mobility for a couple of sessions, or a couple of weeks, couple of months, whatever.
Couple of years.
And I was starting to pull up pretty sore in the usual spots for me, lower back, etc. And then I'm like, well, it's not that I don't train hard. Yeah, I train hard, but it's actually a lack of discipline, because it gets to a point where it's easy to train hard and it's comfortable to train hard, but you don't have the discipline to do the not cool stuff like stretching and band work, etc.
We were talking at the start of this about, like, because obviously coronavirus is going on at the moment, like, people are getting out of routine. I think where it might fall for you guys is to start creating that routine and a clear structure for people. So what I mean by that is, people are probably going to do more things at the end of class. If you give broad statements like, you need to stretch, people don't know what to stretch, a lot of them, how to stretch it. But if you go, guys, today we're going to work on hip mobility drills. We're going to do external, internal rotation mobility drills before at the end of program. Like, that gives them clear structure. Plus, the education is the missing part. Guys, I'm giving you from experience that you need to be doing this. I've had this amount of injuries, but they haven't experienced it yet. So for them, it's not real. So if they'll just keep going and going balls to the wall until something happens. So I think education and clear structure and a routine would be the three things that need to be kind of addressed and put into play.
That's really good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Muzz,
That's
do
a lot
you
on
want
the
to humble brag
coaches.
anymore? Is there any more questions that you got? Or?
It should be.
No, I'm tired of listening to you.
I got a pretty epic curveball I want to throw your way, John, if we got time for that.
We got time?
Yeah, so I've got quite a large kids program at my academy, and being the fact that we're all locked indoors at the moment, I've had quite a few kids and parents ask me for kids-specific, jiu-jitsu-specific conditioning.
Really?
Yeah, what can they do physically to be physically better, aside from technique, at home for when they get back to the mats? So, I mean, that's something.
Make them run around the block.
I mean, I'm not going to tell them to go and
Alas.
deadlift and hang power clean, because they're going to snap themselves.
How old are these kids?
Man, this is kids from 7 to 13 age group.
So
So
kids should just be out there having fun at that age, doing all
yeah,
sorts.
so that's kind of my thoughts. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what kids can do. If they feel like they want to do something, and they're sick of doing hip escapes up and down the hallway, what can they do?
In terms of technical drills, I suppose that's more your round, but I can say this in terms of, they find the athletes that are really, really good were cross-sport athletes. So not the ones that specialize from an early age. Very rare, very few of those are the ones that are actually the elite
Have you read
athletes
The
further
Sports
down the
Gene?
line. So,
Have you read the book The Sports Gene?
Talent's overrated?
No, The Sports Gene. Same outcome. You've read The Sports Gene.
You don't want to specialize too soon. And everyone thinks like, these little kids that I see doing jiu-jitsu and boxing, most of them aren't in the game 20, 30 years down the track.
I think they find the sweet
Obviously,
spot
there's
about
exceptions
12
to the rule.
where they hit.
but they find the ones that are the best that are learning cross skills, like getting the balance, gymnastics, dance, martial arts, jiu-jitsu, whatever, because those cross skills tend to be like, there's those patterns that are stored in the brain that when you come to it, it pulls on that, like that memory, and finds some relation that it can use that or draw an analogy from that or use that.
Part of what we to do with burnout as well, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Bird down.
Yeah, like if you start a sport when you're 4 years old and you're training like an animal, by the time you're 12, you might
boredom,
be over
100%.
So would it be fair to sum that up and say, don't worry about the conditioning, just be a kid.
Be a kid, have fun.
Don't be on the PlayStation.
Think of
but
fun games. Think of building.
Ride your bike, climb trees.
Yeah, go do all
chase
those kid
each other
things.
around the backyard.
Have fun.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how many of those will build underpinning adaptations that they can use. And at this level, they don't need to specialize and think about energy systems or any of that shit. Just go have fun.
I mean, they're all almost got endless gas tanks anyway.
That's it. Exactly.
I mean, exactly. Turn those things off.
They roll all session, then their parents are like, they go home and they just do jiu-jitsu and skipping and push-ups, and I'm like, geez, I'm
Exactly.
knackered.
If we can we step it back for a second if we're going to wind this up, and if you were to give some general advice in just simple people language about, generally speaking, if you're doing jiu-jitsu and you want to add in some strength and conditioning, and if we're including prehab, rehab, just real broad strokes, what would you?
Just
what would
give
you
us
say?
a program. Monday
Just
morning,
give you a set program.
Monday
No, no, no.
Just give me
evening.
a set method.
No, it's like super broadly. Like before, you said train maybe once or twice a week in terms of your strength and conditioning. You would suggest probably do some sort of stretching, recovery, mobility work before or after training each time you train. That one you didn't say, but
Yeah.
Apart from get a coach.
When
That would be
you-
number one, right? Get a coach.
Like when you start, this is two things. One, if you're starting out and you're new to it and you're just enjoying the process, it's all going to work, right? If you've got special problems or special requirements in terms of you've got specific injuries or you want to go down the sports performance realm, then you need to start specializing and know what you're doing or get someone to help you. But if at the moment, from like a generic standpoint, I suppose it's all going to work, and that's the advantage of being a novice lifter, which means if you're going
I
to
don't get this guy to commit to anything.
Well-
Can you just say stretch or something?
No way. I hate people who talk, you can't talk in absolutes because everyone's different, right? Everyone comes in with a different problem, a different requirement, different need, different work frequency, different stresses in their life, different nutrition ailments, like
Genetics, everything.
and to just go, everyone do this template program.
No.
That's where we go.
But that's what not what I'm asking. Or that's why I'm trying to be really clear about it. Like we're being very general.
Yeah, it's-
And going, well, if you're going to be doing strength training, let's say that you're training jits 5 times a week, probably once or twice a week for your strength program is enough. Maybe try to do a little bit of recovery specific to, like, so for example, like I've got a stretching routine that I do every time I roll, which takes 15 to 20 minutes. It's not about getting flexible. It's basically just about helping my recovery. There's so much, it's just isometric I might be mangling up the words, but we do a lot of squeezing.
Contractions.
Yeah, contractions, and then for an extended period, right?
Yeah.
So the stretching routine's about trying to undo the tension. I've had someone hanging off my head for 5 minutes. I want to walk away from the session feeling like I'm still
Loose and limber.
Yeah, so it's not about trying to get flexible. I think of that as just recovery. So I'm doing that every time I roll, but that's not my strength and conditioning workout.
I don't think it's a bad idea. So, I mean, if you put it like that, do something that makes you feel better. So soft tissue release, hot baths, recovery, extra sleep, more food, less food, like something that makes you feel better. That's what works for you. And if the point of this is what should they be doing so that they feel better, yeah, definitely think about your recovery and do things that speed up your rate of recovery or make you feel limber. Yeah, do some recovery.
Do some recovery.
Many roads lead to Rome, though. How you do that is what works best for you.
John, you've mentioned a couple of times the phrase more food or eat more. So do you see a pattern where people...
Link's just hanging out to eat another burger.
We got another
I
45
did
minutes.
just have a muffin.
Just sign us up.
It's
We're
my
going back
birthday,
in.
so it's okay. But do you see frequently where people perhaps undereat for the activities they're doing because
Massively.
they've been told they need to be ripped, or
Absolutely.
ex-athlete eats like this, or don't eat gluten, or carbs are bad for you, or carbs are good for you, or whatever?
Yes, 100%. It's the same as training. Like most of our information or understanding of it comes from social media and infographics and stuff like that, and very few people will actually go, hey, what do I actually need to do? So yeah, I'd say from the athlete realm, there's a lot of, not always, but a lot of under eating, and from the general
not me.
pop getting into it, it tends to be overeating. But that's a very broad.
That's a whole nother
stroke
podcast in
overview.
itself.
Yeah, that's another 45 nutrition. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Should
That's
do
a rabbit
that.
hole.
We should do
That's
that.
a vortex.
Yeah, but we're not going to get anything specific out of this guy.
Well, any self-justification I can have eating burgers. I'm totally
Do
I
you
need
want
the
to
calories?
If you want to
man.
eat burgers, you should eat burgers.
Oh, he eats burgers.
I eat the fuck out of
Burgers
burgers.
are perfectly fine in a healthy, balanced diet as long as you tolerate all the foods that are in it. If you like gluten,
Thanks,
you eat
John
gluten.
said.
No specific.
Do you hear that,
answer.
guys? Eat as many burgers as you want, and you'll still have
He
a six-pack.
committed.
That's the
So
only-
to
only
sum
thing you've
up
committed to the
45
whole
minutes to an
podcast.
hour, just eat burgers.
That's the whole point of this podcast.
Yeah.
No, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Muzz, anything that you want to add in?
Closing
Slash
thoughts.
any final humble brags?
Just to throw a spanner in the works, love a guy called Dan John. He's an awesome strength and conditioning coach in the US. And I'll be bastardizing the quote, but I love that he said, what makes you think you're so special that you can't do a program off the internet and improve? So just to...
Because you're going to lift like a spastic and hurt yourself. That could be one of them.
you know,
That's why I have a coach.
That aside, there are reasons to have a coach, but like John has said many times, if you aren't experienced in it, you will get adaptations from almost anything.
Yeah.
So if you want to try something, just start with a beginner's program off the internet.
Like a what's it,
Like a
side
2-day
barbell or
like a
5x5, something like that, you mean? Or
day-
it doesn't matter.
Sure. Why not?
We're gonna get.
Whatever.
I'm gonna force you to write one.
Like
and
a
put it up
2-day
online.
lift-
I
a 2-day
refuse to give
lifting
any
program or
absolute
something
answers
like
on this
that.
podcast.
I'm not gonna respond.
I can neither confirm nor deny that allegation statement.
If you're a beast of strength, maybe do 2 sessions of conditioning and 1 session of strength a week. If you're weak and you're super fit, maybe just flip it. There we go.
Why are you looking at me and laughing when you're like,
Yeah.
you're weak?
If you want any of the
I'm super
absolutes,
fit, but I am weak.
Muzz is not scared.
Hey, there's nothing
do this.
there's nothing absolute about it. It just gives you something to start with.
Yeah, and like white belts, get on the mat and train more.
Disclaimer: it may
Why
not
about
work.
train more?
Yeah, white belts train more, and then I guess when we're talking about strength and conditioning, we're talking for, kind of blue belt. Like, again, generalizing that, but we're talking for guys who are kind of blue belt and upwards, skills starting to pick up, and they're trying to look for those gaps. Yeah, all right, that was pretty good.
summed it up, nailed it.
Yeah,
Cool. High five. Wrap it up.
Thanks, mate.
nice work. We got to figure out how to sign this thing off. Make sure you train, guys. So we just finished up with Jon Sharp. Yeah, so what did you guys think about that conversation?
Want me to go first? Or you, want me
You
to
go first.
I thought it was really good. Obviously a little bit higher level, a little bit less absolutist, as we were saying, in terms of giving guidelines. But I thought a lot of the stuff he said resonated for me, particularly being an older masters athlete, obviously guiding a lot of younger athletes. I think for me, the number one takeaway for most of this stuff is do strength and conditioning first to keep yourself safe on the mat. Yeah, second to get more athletic. But if at any point your strength and conditioning impedes on your skills training, then you've got to ask backwards. If you're doing so much lifting or running or riding or whatever that you can't train your skills effectively, in whatever form that may be, then you need to take a look at whether you want to be a lifter or you want to be a jiu-jitsu guy. That's kind of where I took it from, but he's a very smart man. Massive biceps. A little bit jealous of that, but yeah, I thought it was pretty
Some
awesome.
big quads.
What about you, Muzz?
No, I enjoyed it. I haven't been as active in the strength and conditioning world for the last 3 years, as much as I used to be anyway. So felt a bit rusty with the thought processes, and so it was enjoyable to listen to, and it kind of got those thought processes running again. A lot about self-analysis in there, like us, or not necessarily self-analysis, but relying on our coaches to be able to analyze us. We don't have that, so who does it for us? So if your coach isn't switched on with it, yeah, you have that, but I don't have that. You don't have it, so we have to kind of do it for ourselves. And if you haven't been taught to, maybe here's an idea. I think, like, if you look at it, I'm very visual, and so I'll finish an analogy for you this time. If we think about it, like sitting on a stool, and I'll break strength, and even though strength is part of conditioning, I'll say strength work and conditioning work. We got 2 legs, and then we've got your technique, and then mental training. and you're sitting on the stool,
The 4 pillars.
4 pillars, the thickness of them and length of them is represented by how good you are at that aspect of training. Which side of the stool are you falling off?
Yep.
And,
That's a great analogy, Miles.
and so if people sit on
10
it,
out of 10 for that analogy.
I know 100% for me, I'd be arsing over on the mental fortitude and just the mental training side. If I go into a match or just a training session relaxed with the intention to have fun, or sometimes different ideas in my head, but the idea is just generally that I feel calm and confident. I know I wrestle 1,000 times better than if I look across the room and I go, oh shit, Lindsay's looking at me and he's looking fresh. It's not going to be a good day.
Yep.
And then I wrestle terribly, and it's not a sign of my conditioning. It's not a sign of my strength. It's not my technical ability. I've just shat myself in my head, basically.
Yeah.
So for me, it's that. And then the second piece I know personally for me would be my high end. I can roll at a general pace for freaking ever. But if someone, Everyday Pahad, is with me for a couple minutes, I'll be a blue belt very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that's as an idea for a self-assessment, that's important to take away. I had other things to say, but I'll move on.
Some of the main takeaways I got, which everyone agreed on, was if you're a beginner in jiu-jitsu, so if your skill is lacking, then just focus on gathering your skills, work your skills, build that up. And the strength and conditioning becomes relevant later on. And it falls into a couple of main groups. So one is, if you're competing, then you need to make sure that your performance of skill is not being let down by your lack of gas, basically. So you need to build that up so you can perform the skills at the intensity, frequency, and duration that you need to. The other area that it becomes important is prehab, rehab, which, because we're old athletes and we've been injured a bunch of times, that's quite important to us. And that's where most of our focus lies now, is being able to get on the mat every day and doing what we need to do in strength and conditioning, but from a prehab and rehab perspective, rather than just trying to be like freaky bullshit strong.
I do feel like the younger athletes need to focus on that, though, not make the mistakes that potentially we made.
I
By
agree 100%.
neglecting that when
If
we're
you're-
Saving a lot of time.
If you're doing the things that if you haven't been injured, then what we're really talking about is good recovery and kind of protective training, for lack of a better phrase. So a lot of time, rehab, once you've got over the injury, you continue doing it, and it ends up just being prehab to stop you getting injured in that same way again. And if you've been training a long time, at least in my experience, I found that I have recurring things that if I'm not constantly managing and doing, like the back issues, and
100%.
which is really common in jiu-jitsu. So rehab often turns into prehab once the injury is recovered from. You just got to keep doing it to stay away from being injured again. But beginners, like baby beginners, when you've got no skill, the strength and conditioning is not that important. As you get more skillful, it does become more relevant. The bias needs to be towards your skills training, though, so there's no point training strength and conditioning 5 times a week if it's stopping you from having the gas to actually get on the mat and train your skills training.
Yeah.
And then, if you're just training recreationally and you're not really, like, if you don't really enjoy flogging yourself in conditioning training, then don't bother doing it.
Which is totally fine as
Yeah,
well. I
there's
mean, we
nothing
spend
wrong
a lot
with
of time talking about athletes, but
Yeah.
the majority of people are recreational jiu-jitsu practitioners.
80-90% of people that
And
do jiu-jitsu,
it's
period, is
totally
recreational.
whatever role that plays in your life, it's
They're
entirely
doing
up to
jiu-jitsu
you.
for the fitness.
Yeah, and
Like,
for the social aspect,
Yeah.
and for something that, some mental exercise, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the other thing that was really good for me to take away from that was understanding that you have to train both ends. So yeah, in the simple, like, dumb jiu-jitsu guy terms, you got to train the cardio and the strength. I know that he was explicit about saying that's not how it is, but I think that's the way that we misunderstand it to be. You've got to do the
You could even say low intensity and high intensity.
Yeah.
And the issue is, particularly for those who really get down the wormhole of jiu-jitsu and enjoy the hard training, is that they enjoy doing things hard.
Yep.
And so, and jiu-jitsu is freaking ridiculously hard anyway.
Yep.
So then anything they go and do outside of it, they get the impression in their head that they have to floor themselves to get any benefit from it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, 100%.
understanding that for most people, they need to start low. And
Yeah.
one of the one really interesting thing to do is to get yourself a heart rate monitor, do like some Phil Maffetone, look them up, Magic, and go 180 minus your age,
Yep.
and see what intensity you, for a lot of people it's actually a fast walk, but see what intensity you actually achieve for like half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever it may be, staying in a solid aerobic zone, and
Yep.
see how unfit aerobically you actually are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely doing that less exciting work requires a lot of discipline. It's very
Discipline.
important.
Yeah.
That's why I find
And
the
not being caught up in the Pahada mindset 24/7. I know for myself, twice before two big international tournaments, I took the comp training mentality into the weights room, which is where you should not take that mentality.
Yep.
And I injured myself, 3 weeks out twice, and had to fly to the States managing an injury, and then competing, with managing this injury because I took the wrong mindset into the weights
Yep.
room, which is quite a mistake.
yeah.
No, overall, I think it was a super interesting chat. I mean, John's he's a freak, and the athletes that we've got here who train with him, their conditioning side of things is bulletproof. They're phenomenal. The areas that we're always working on, obviously, is technique, strategy, and then mindset. So the psychology that's going on, and that's a whole nother podcast or 10. That's a huge area to tap into that most people don't, and if they do, it's usually in a fairly unsophisticated way, and it's often based on just internet meme bullshit. And most jiu-jitsu guys try to shortcut it just by everyday pahada.
That doesn't necessarily mean always go hard though.
No, I know.
It means to do your best.
But also,
your best sometimes might be that low intensity walk. So have that Pahada mindset to do what needs to be fucking done.
yeah. Which
That's the hard
sums it
part.
up.
So I think defining discipline is really important too, which is it's doing the things that we don't want to do that we should be, because we all want to roll, and a lot of people.
So easy to rock up and just roll.
Yeah. So like if you find rolling the really difficult part of class, then you're going to look at someone who's jumping in there all the time and thinking that they're quite disciplined. But if you love drilling and the other guy's not into drilling, then they're not going to seem disciplined. So it really comes down to what you actually enjoy doing. But discipline's super important.
So, summing it up, you need to either do some self-assessment or check in with the coach and get assessed
Ideally, find a coach.
Yeah.
But if you can't, self-assess.
on those 4 pillars
Yep.
that we discuss.
Yep.
And one thing that John said early on, which I would agree with, at least I'm pretty sure I remember him saying it, but I think it anyway, that not enough people in jiu-jitsu just in general work on their overall conditioning. So start with low level, and once you've built your base, you've got to work
you
both
mean
ends.
walking, running, cycling, something like that?
Something cyclical,
Yep.
road work, Muhammad Ali style.
Boxers been doing it for years, mate. They know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we had this discussion the other week when I was proving my ignorance about understanding what anaerobic is. That at least my understanding of what you guys were trying to tell me was that a lot of the recovery comes from that kind of base fitness. And that is so profoundly important for us. Well, obviously if you're competing, but even in the gym, right? Because most people do 5-minute rounds or whatever it might be, a 1-minute break, and then they jump in and do another round. You do 5 of those a night. So there has to be some sort of recovery there. You don't want to be dead by the third
You want
round.
a quality session, yeah.
Yeah,
Something-
exactly. And you want to remain safe, and you're more likely to get injured when you get fatigued. So, yeah, that's really important. But no, I found it really, really interesting, and there's definitely some things that I didn't understand that I understand better now.
That's the purpose.
That's the purpose. So,
I think it was
Mic drop.
I think it was a great first little podcast, guys.
not too bad.
I
not too
enjoyed
bad.
it. Thank
Not
you
too
very
bad.
much.
Thanks for being here, Murray Humblebrag, Ballenden. I know you've probably got more important things to do.
Always.
But no, guys, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll be coming back to you with some more things. So we're going to be touching on the psychology side of things and nutrition and all those sorts of things, amongst a bunch of other stuff as well. So yeah, guys, enjoy.
And we won't have to cry.